Okay, everybody, let's talk about the law of demand and law of supply. Okay, this is not really that complicated unless you mix them up. What you need to do here is you need to concentrate on the law of demand and law of supply, essentially being the question, how do buyers and sellers react to a change in price? And the best thing you could do here is keep both demand and supply, buyer and the seller, separate. Don't assume you know what they're going to do, because these things empirically are going to happen when there is a change in price. So this section is all about how do buyers and sellers actually react within a market when the price of something changes. Okay. Now, we all know that demand is the buyer or the consumer, and the supply is the seller and the producer. So we're going to start by looking at the buyer and the consumer on the demand side. Now, the demand has actually a very specific definition. Demand is the ability, willingness, and desire to buy various quantities at various prices. Now, for demand to exist, you need to have ability, willingness, and desire. Okay. So, maybe somebody that is homeless, wants to own a house, but they don't financially have the ability to do it, so they wouldn't be considered in demand for a home. Okay. Uh, Willingness is like, I may have saved up a few $100,000, but I'm not willing to pull the trigger on a Bugatti. And I mean, that's a nice car, but I'm not willing to pull the trigger on doing that. Okay. And I might actually have money and I'm willing to spend it at a concert, but I have no desire to go watch Taylor Swift fall on. Well, I might actually watch that, but to go to a Taylor Swift concert. So, I'm not in demand for Taylor Swift tickets. Okay. So you need to have willingness and ability and desire to demand something. Okay. Now, a demand curve slopes like this. Okay. In a downward, a couple things about the demand curve. First, there's an inverse relationship between price and the quantity that is demanded at a price. What that means is as price goes up, the quantity that people are going to desire is going to drop. And when the price goes down, the quantity people are going to desire is going to go up. That should make really perfect sense, right? Price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Price goes up, I don't want as much. That's it. Price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Stuff goes on sale, I want more of it. That's simple. Uh, For example, at $5, maybe 7 people want it. At $4, maybe 11 people want it. At $3, maybe 15 people want it. At $2, maybe 20 people want it. At $1, 29 people want it. That's why it slopes this direction, because we know that demand curve slopes downwards. As prices change, the quantity demanded is going to change. Think like a consumer. Price goes down, quantity demanded of a good or service goes up, and price goes up, quantity demanded of a good or service is going to go down. This is known as the law of demand, right here. That's it. Okay. Whenever we're dealing with any kind of situation, always start with the price. What has happened to the price? When the price changes, how does that impact quantity demanded? Now, perfect example, we have a gallon of milk here, and of course we want to find out how to establish a curve like that. Essentially what you're going to ask is, what is the most a person is willing to pay at a certain price? Eventually, if you start selling it at certain prices, or if you simply pull around and ask what is the most people are willing to pay, you're going to get these answers, and then bang, you literally just plug it in like you would a graph. $5, 7, $4, 12, 3.15, 2.20, 1.29, and you have the slope of a demand curve. Notice, by the way, it says what's the most you're willing to pay, because we want to know what is the most somebody's willing to pay. If we ask people, what are you willing to pay? Most people want to pay nothing or undersell. That right there is that demand curve. That's simple. Okay. Now, there are a couple of reasons why it's sloping down. From a technical term, why do people buy more when the price drops? Well, number one is something called the substitution effect. People that would have bought something else will now buy the good or service simply because the price has dropped. Oh, I wouldn't have bought milk, a gallon of milk at $5, but you know what? It's dropped to $3. So people that wouldn't have bought milk at $5 are all of a sudden, yeah, you know what? Milk is pretty cheap. I'm going to go ahead and buy the milk. Sounds good. You also have what's called the income effect. People actually buy more because they feel richer, and understand that when prices go down, that actually does make you richer. So you were like, hey, I would have bought 1 gallon of milk at $5, but now it's three. Baby, I'm buying more milk. Let's go. So you buy 2 gallons of milk. And that's another example of why that demand curve slopes downwards. Price drops, people want more. And finally, diminishing marginal utility. The only way people are going to buy more or find something more useful is if the price actually goes down. Diminishing marginal utility is basically diminishing less marginal, one extra unit utility satisfaction. And of course, we talked about this earlier on with thinking at the margin, the idea that the more you do an activity, the little less efficient that activity becomes. The same thing happens with goods and services. You can only buy so many goods and services before you just don't really get satisfaction from them nearly as much. And that, of course, utility equals satisfaction. So, if price drops enough, you're like, well, I don't really. I mean, milk is milk. At $3, I don't really need more milk. But all of a sudden, you're kind of like, yeah, but it's down to $1. I I probably could use it for $1, even though it's just milk. But it's so cheap, I gotta buy it. All right. So you have these substitution effect, income effect, and diminishing marginal utility. That's why that sucker is sloped downward. Remember, this is when price changes, quantity demanded changes in an inverse way. Now, let's talk about the law of supply. Notice the curve is different here, and we're talking about the seller or the producer. We want to not think like a consumer anymore. And it's really hard for people to do this because they think like a consumer. But right now, whenever we're talking supply, you got to take the consumer out of the equation and think about your desire for profit and your desire to produce stuff. And remember that the producer wants the highest possible price. People always get stuck with, well, wait a minute, high prices are bad because consumers won't buy. And my answer to that is, you don't know that. A price is going to be high because people desire more of it. That's entirely possible. And so get out of that idea that producers don't want high prices. Producers want high prices. Don't say things like the buyer or the consumer or like the people when you're dealing with supply. Your producers make goods and services, suppliers make goods and services, not people, not consumers, not buyers. Now, the supply is the amount of goods and services available. That's simple. That's it. Supply curves slope upwards. The relationship is direct, meaning as prices go up, I can make more. That's simple, right? Price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. Price goes down, I have to make less. I don't have as much money. All right. And it's not worth it for me to keep making more if the price continues to drop. So price goes down, quantity supplied actually goes down. Okay. This is known as the law of supply. This is how suppliers react to a change in price. Price goes up, I should make more. Price goes down, I need to make less. Here's a barrel of oil. Barrel of oil that makes a ton of stuff, plastics, clothing, toothbrushes, obviously use them in cars. You use them to heat stuff. And a barrel of oil equals 48 gallons. Now, to get oil, you have to drill. But it's not worth it for everybody to drill if the price of oil is low. And as the price of oil goes up, more people are like, oh, wait a minute, now it's worth it to drill. So if we get like oil at a very, very cheap price, a country like Saudi Arabia is like, yeah, I'm going to drill. The price is like $5, but that's the primary way we get our income. So we're drilling for oil at $5. And of course, oil price drops a lot. They're in big, big trouble. Oil price goes up to $15. Iran jumps in and says, now it's worth it for us to start drilling for oil. Oil price gets up to $40. And US oil suppliers on land start to drill more. It's about at that price when oil suppliers in the United States on land are going to start drilling. When the price gets around 60, then the deep sea oil rigs start kicking into action and starting to drill, and because they're seeing profitability right there. It costs a lot of money to drill on the sea with platforms, but for $40, won't do it. $60, I'll do it. The current price is around $61, so you're getting to a price to where some like companies, they're like, I know we're allowed to drill more, but do I really want to? Because the price isn't that high. Now, if the price of oil gets to $90, then they're like, yeah, let's drill, baby, drill. But just because governments want you to drill for oil more doesn't mean you will drill for oil more, because the price has to be actually pretty high. Now, why does this slope upward? Quite simply put, at higher prices, producers can make more. They're making more money. That means I can put that money into making more product at a higher price. I want to produce as much as I can so I can make a ton more money. And then, of course, it also incentivizes new producers to actually enter the market. Hey, and I'm an entrepreneur. It's worth it for me now because that price is really high to try to produce that good or service because I'm going to make more money. And remember, this is how suppliers act to a change in price. Remember, demand, change in price, increase in uh, price, lower quantity demanded, decrease in price, higher quantity demanded, and for supply, an increase in price, higher quantity supplied, a lower price, less quantity supplied.